His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of shame in his species. I was not a hunter. I was a monster. The fifth day brought rain, not the gentle rain of Earth, but the violent downpours that characterized Narration IV during storm season. Water fell in sheets so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Lightning cracked across the sky, and thunder rolled through the ruins like the drums of war. Vorthak had spent the night shivering in his shelter, fever from his infected wounds making his thoughts cloudy. His injured arm had swollen to twice its normal size despite the antibiotics. Every movement brought fresh pain. His supplies were nearly gone. His plasma lance had enough charge for maybe 3 more shots. But more than the physical deterioration, something had broken inside him. The psychological weight of being hunted, of never feeling safe, of jumping at every sound, had worn him down in ways that physical injury never could. He no longer moved like a predator. He moved like something that was running away. As dawn broke through the storm clouds, Vorthak made a decision. The extraction point was 20 kilometers north in the mountains beyond the ruins. If he could reach it, if he could survive until the 7th day, the hunt would end. He would not win, but he would not die either. The concordance rules stated that if both parties survived the full week, the duel would be declared a draw. For the first time in his hunting career, Vorthak was no longer thinking about victory. He was thinking about survival. He gathered his remaining gear and began the trek north. The rain made the ground treacherous and his weakened state made every step an ordeal, but he pushed forward, driven by the desperate hope of reaching safety. Jiwoo watched him go from her vantage point in a half-collapsed tower. She had known he would make for the extraction point eventually. It was the logical move for someone who had given up on winning. Part of her felt satisfaction at seeing the mighty hunter reduced to a desperate fleeing creature. But another part, the part that had been trained as a soldier and raised with honor, felt something else. Not pity exactly, more like recognition. Vorthak had finally learned the lesson she had been teaching. He understood what his victims had felt. He had been broken and rebuilt into something that might actually understand the value of the lives he had taken. The question was, what would she do with that knowledge? She could let him reach the extraction point, let him survive and carry the shame of his defeat for the rest of his life. Or she could end it here, ensuring he never hunted again in the most permanent way possible. Jiwoo packed her gear and began to follow. She moved like a ghost through the rain, her skills honed by years of military training and 2 decades of survival experience. The storm that slowed Vorthak barely affected her. She had grown up in monsoon seasons on Earth. This rain was heavy, but it was not unfamiliar. By midday, Vorthak had covered only 8 kilometers. His pace was slowing as exhaustion and pain took their toll. He stopped to rest in a small cave formation, collapsing against the stone wall and breathing heavily. His recording drone hovered nearby, its presence a constant reminder that billions were watching his humiliation. "I thought I was invincible," he said to the drone, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought that because I was strong and skilled, I had the right to take whatever prey I wanted. I never considered that they were people with lives, with families, with dreams. They were just targets to me, trophies for my collection." He looked at his damaged arm, the scales discolored and oozing infection. "The human could have killed me a dozen times by now. But she did not. She is making me live with this knowledge, making me understand. It is a crueler punishment than death, and I deserve every moment of it." The storm intensified as afternoon wore on. Vorthak forced himself to continue moving, but his vision was starting to blur. The infection was spreading. If he did not receive proper medical treatment soon, it might kill him even if Jiwoo did not. He stumbled and fell, crashing hard against the muddy ground. For a long moment he simply lay there, rain pouring down on his prone form. It would be so easy to just stop, to give up, to let the planet or the infection or the human finish what had been started. But something in him refused to quit. Not pride anymore. Pride had died days ago. This was something else. A small, stubborn spark of will that insisted on continuing despite everything. Vorthak pushed himself back to his feet and kept walking. As night fell on the 5th day, he finally reached the foothills of the mountain range. The extraction point was at the summit, still 12 kilometers of steep, treacherous climbing away. In his current condition, it might as well have been on another planet. He found shelter in an overhang and collapsed. Sleep came quickly, born of exhaustion rather than rest. His dreams were haunted by the faces of those he had killed. Hyun-soo, Mira, Jun, others whose names he had never bothered to learn. They stood around him in his dreams, silent and accusing. When he woke in the darkness, he was not alone. Jiwoo sat across from him, her bow unstrung and resting beside her. A small fire burned between them, providing warmth and light. She had been there for who knew how long, watching him sleep. Vorthak tried to reach for his plasma lance, but his injured arm would not respond properly, and his other arms felt like lead weights. He was too weak to fight, too tired to run. Go ahead, he said quietly. End it. I will not resist. Jiwoo stared at him through the firelight. Rain continued to pour outside their shelter, creating a curtain of water that isolated them from the rest of the world. Finally, she spoke. Tell me about them, she said. About who? The 3 humans you killed. Tell me about them. Not how you hunted them, about who they were. Vorthak was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he began to speak. The first was a male. I did not learn his name until later. Hyun-soo. He was on my homeworld as part of a cultural exchange program. I found him in the nature preserve studying our wildlife. He was unarmed, alone. I followed him for 2 days before I struck. He never knew I was there until the end. Jiwoo's face remained expressionless, but her hands had curled into fists. The second was a female. Mira, a terraforming engineer working on one of the outer colonies. She had 3 offspring. I learned this only afterward when I researched my trophy. She was checking atmospheric processors when I found her. She ran when she saw me. I gave chase. It took 6 hours before I caught her. Vorthak's voice grew quieter. She begged. She told me about her children. I killed her anyway. The fire crackled between them. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The third was Jun, young, recently mated. He was a cargo hauler, delivering supplies to isolated outposts. I sabotaged his ship's navigation system so he would crash on a hunting preserve world. He survived the crash but was injured. I tracked him for 3 days while he tried to repair his emergency beacon. When I finally confronted him, he was so weak from his injuries that he could barely stand. I killed him and took his identification tags as a trophy. Vorthak looked up at Jiwoo, and for the first time, she saw genuine remorse in his alien features. I knew their names, he continued. I researched them afterward. I learned about their lives, but I never allowed myself to think of them as people. They were just successful hunts, proof of my skill, additions to my legend. He paused. I was wrong. I was a murderer who called himself a hunter to justify the unjustifiable. Jiwoo remained silent for several minutes, staring into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion. Hyun-soo was my mentor. He taught me how to survive in hostile environments, how to read terrain and use it to my advantage. He was supposed to be protected by diplomatic immunity, but you killed him anyway and bribed officials to cover it up. Vorthak closed his eyes. I did. Mira's children are being raised by their grandparents now. The youngest was only 2 years old when you killed their mother. They will grow up without her because you wanted a trophy. Yes. Jun's widow still wears her wedding ring.
She has never remarried.
Some humans mate for life, did you know that? You did not just kill Jun, you destroyed her future. I know that now. I am sorry. The words are inadequate, but I am sorry. Jiwoo reached into her pack and pulled out a datapad. She activated it and turned it so Vorthak could see the screen. On it were images. Hyun-soo teaching a class of young soldiers. Mira with her 3 children, all of them laughing. Jun and his wife on their wedding day. These are the people you killed, Jiwoo said. Not targets, not prey. People with lives and families and futures. I want you to look at them. Really look at them. Vorthak looked. He forced himself to study each image to see the joy and life in their faces, to understand what he had taken from the galaxy. Tears clear and alien ran down his scaled face. I cannot undo what I have done, he said. No punishment is sufficient. No apology can bring them back. I do not ask for mercy because I do not deserve it. Jiwoo closed the datapad and put it away. Then she picked up her bow and drew an arrow, pointing it at Vorthak's heart. Her hands were steady. Her aim was perfect. One release of the string and it would all be over. I have spent 5 days teaching you what it means to be hunted, she said. You have felt fear. You have felt helplessness. You have felt what they felt. The lesson is complete. Then finish it, Vorthak said. I am ready. Jiwoo held the position for a long moment. Outside rain. Day 3 dawned with heavy fog rolling through the jungle. Vorthak woke from restless sleep, his wounds aching despite the medical treatment. He checked his equipment carefully and made a decision. The jungle was working against him. The terrain favored stealth and ambush over direct confrontation. He needed to change the battlefield. The abandoned colony ruins lay 30 kilometers to the northeast. Open spaces, clear sightlines, structural advantages for a larger, stronger opponent. If he could drive the human toward the ruins, the hunt would shift in his favor. Vorthak began moving with purpose, leaving obvious trails and markers. He wanted Jiwoo to know where he was going. He wanted her to follow. The ruins would be his killing ground. What he did not know was that Jiwoo had anticipated this move. She had studied the colony records during her preparation. She knew the layout of the ruins, the structural weaknesses, the dangerous areas where building collapses were likely. While Vorthak had been hunting her, she had spent 2 nights inside those ruins preparing them. It took Vorthak most of the day to reach the colony site. The jungle gradually thinned, giving way to overgrown landing pads and collapsed buildings. The settlement had been meant for 5,000 colonists but never reached more than a few hundred before the planet proved too hostile. Now it was a ghost town, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Vorthak entered the ruins carefully. His 4 eyes scanned every shadow, every broken window, every darkened doorway. The space was more open than the jungle, but it also provided countless hiding spots. Buildings leaned at dangerous angles, their structural integrity compromised by years of neglect and hostile weather. "Human," Vorthak called out, his voice echoing through the empty streets. "I know you are here. I can smell you. The game has gone on long enough. Face me with honor, and I will make your death quick." No response, just the wind whistling through broken windows and the creak of unstable structures. Vorthak moved deeper into the ruins. He chose to enter what looked like an old administrative building, 3 stories tall but leaning heavily to one side. Inside, collapsed ceilings and debris created a maze of passages and rooms. The lighting was dim, which should have given him an advantage with his superior night vision. But something was wrong. As he moved through the building, he began to hear sounds. Footsteps echoing from above. The scrape of metal on metal from the rooms ahead. The soft pad of feet on broken concrete from behind. He spun around, plasma lance raised, but saw nothing. The sounds were coming from everywhere and nowhere. His 4 ears, usually such an asset, could not pinpoint any single source. The acoustics of the ruined building created strange echoes that his brain could not properly process. "Show yourself," he roared, frustration creeping into his voice. In response, another sound. This time closer. Vorthak fired his plasma lance at the source, the bolt of superheated energy punching through a wall. Nothing there, just empty space and the smell of burning concrete. He was being toyed with. Jiwoo had spent those 2 nights in the ruins setting up acoustic traps, simple mechanical devices that created noise when triggered by timers or tripwires, pieces of metal hanging from wires that would bang together, loose debris balanced in ways that would fall and clatter at the right moment, springs and counterweights that would slam doors or shutters. The ruins had become an instrument, and she was playing Vorthak like a song. He wasted 2 full charges from his plasma lance shooting at phantom sounds. Each missed shot increased his frustration and decreased his remaining ammunition. By the time he realized what was happening, he had used half his weapon's power cells on empty air. "Clever," he snarled to the recording drone. "But tricks and illusions cannot save you forever, human. Eventually you will make a mistake." He was right about one thing. Eventually someone would make a mistake. But he was wrong about who. Vorthak emerged from the administrative building and moved toward what looked like the colony's main power station. The building was more stable than the others, with reinforced walls and a solid foundation. Inside, rows of dormant fusion reactors stood silent, their cores long since depleted. This was better. Solid ground, clear sightlines between the massive reactor housings, fewer places for acoustic tricks. Vorthak positioned himself in the center of the building, his back to one of the larger reactors, and waited. He knew the human would come. She had been shadowing him since he entered the ruins. He could feel her presence even if he could not pinpoint her location. Now he had removed her advantages. In this open space, his superior speed and strength would decide the fight. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Vorthak's patience was legendary, earned through hundreds of hunts. He could wait days if necessary. Then he saw her. Just for a moment, a silhouette moving between reactor housings 50 meters away. Finally, Vorthak raised his plasma lance and fired. The bolt streaked through the air and hit the figure dead center. The figure exploded into fragments, not flesh and blood, but cloth and padding. A dummy dressed in Jiwoo's spare clothes. Vorthak's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. He had been so focused on the decoy that he had not noticed the real threat. Above him on the catwalk that ran along the ceiling, a tripwire snapped. The sound of grinding metal filled the air. One of the massive reactor housings, already destabilized by years of neglect, began to topple. Vorthak looked up just in time to see tons of metal and machinery falling toward him. He threw himself to the side with all the speed his species possessed. Almost fast enough. Almost. The reactor housing crashed down, and a piece of broken support beam caught his lower right arm, pinning it against the concrete floor. Pain exploded through Vorthak's body. He roared and pulled, his 3 free arms clawing at the beam, but it was too heavy. He was trapped, and then she appeared. Jiwoo stepped out from behind another reactor housing, her bow drawn and an arrow pointed directly at his heart. She was less than 10 meters away, an impossible shot to miss. They stared at each other across the dusty space. The recording drone hovered nearby, capturing every moment for the billions watching across the galaxy. "You could kill me now," Vorthak said, his voice strained with pain. "One arrow. It would be over." "I could," Jiwoo agreed. Her voice was calm, her hand steady. The arrow did not waver. "But where would be the lesson in that?" "Lesson? You spent your life killing beings who could not fight back. You called it hunting, but it was just murder. Hyunsu could not fight back. Mira could not fight back. Jun could not fight back," she paused. "Now you understand how they felt." Vorthak looked into her eyes and saw no mercy there. But he also saw no cruelty, just cold, absolute determination. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what it feels like to be prey, to be helpless, to know your life is in someone else's hands." Jiwoo lowered her bow slightly, but not completely. "I want you to carry that feeling for the rest of your life. You are not going to kill me? Not yet. The hunt is not over." She turned and walked away, disappearing back into the maze of machinery. "We still have 4 days. Plenty of time for you to learn." For several minutes after she left, Vorthak simply lay there, pinned and bleeding. Finally, with tremendous effort and pain, he managed to shift the beam enough to pull his arm free. It was badly damaged, possibly broken, but he could still move it. He dragged himself to his feet and assessed his situation. One arm severely injured. Plasma lance power down to less than a quarter. Net launcher lost somewhere in the chaos. Medical supplies nearly exhausted, and 4 days remaining in the hunt. But more than the physical damage, something else had changed. Vorthak had hunted for decades without ever truly understanding what his prey experienced. He had killed without ever considering their perspective. Now, for the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to be hunted. The knowledge was bitter. As night fell on the 4th day, Vorthak huddled in a half-collapsed building on the outskirts of the ruins. He had cleaned and bandaged his arm as best he could, but infection was setting in despite the medical treatment. His scales, usually vibrant and shifting in color, had dulled to a sickly gray-green. He activated his personal recorder, separate from the broadcast drone. This was for his own records, his own thoughts. "I have been a fool," he said quietly. "I thought the human would behave like other prey. Run, hide, perhaps fight desperately at the end. But she is not prey. She never was. I walked into a trap that had been prepared since the moment she accepted my challenge." He paused, looking at his damaged arm. "Every step I have taken, she has anticipated. Every advantage I possess, she has turned into a weakness. My strength means nothing when I cannot find her. My speed means nothing when the terrain itself attacks me. My experience means nothing when she is fighting a completely different kind of battle." Somewhere in the darkness outside, he heard a sound. Just a small noise, but it made every muscle in his body tense. Was it her? Was it another animal? Was it just the wind? He did not know. That was the worst part. The not knowing. The constant state of alertness. The fear. "I understand now," Vorthak said to his recorder. "I understand what I took from them. Not just their lives, but their peace, their sense of safety. I made them afraid, and I enjoyed it." She was allowed one weapon of choice and basic survival gear. She chose a Narakas 4. Looked like a green jewel from orbit, but its beauty was deceptive. The planet had killed hundreds of colonists before the settlement was finally abandoned. Toxic plants, aggressive fauna, and unpredictable weather patterns had made it impossible to tame. Now it served as neutral ground for exactly this kind of event. The Concordance monitor ship hung in high orbit, its sensors tracking every movement on the planet below. Inside, Observer Cal then prepared for what had become the most watched event in recent galactic history. 300 billion beings across 10,000 worlds had tuned in to watch. Beginning deployment sequence, Cal then announced in his translated voice. He was a luminari, a species that looked like living crystal formations. His body refracted light in beautiful patterns as he worked the controls. Both contestants will be dropped 50 kilometers apart in the jungle region. Monitoring begins in 3, 2, 1. Hunt initiated. 2 drop pods fell through the atmosphere like meteors. They landed simultaneously in different parts of the jungle, their doors hissing open to reveal the contestants. Vorthak stepped out of his pod first. The jungle humidity hit him immediately, and his scales adjusted their color to better blend with the green environment. He wore minimal armor, just protective coverings over his vital organs. His plasma lance was strapped to his back, a weapon capable of burning through most materials. His net launcher was secured to his lower left arm, ready for quick deployment. He took a deep breath, his 4 nostrils analyzing the air. Thousands of scents flooded his senses. Plant life, decomposing matter, animal musk, and somewhere in all of that, the faint smell of human. 50 kilometers away, but he would find her. The hunt begins, he said to the recording drone following him. Every moment would be broadcast to the galaxy. I give the human credit for accepting this challenge, but bravery without skill is just another word for foolishness. This will be over by nightfall. He began moving through the jungle with confident strides. His forearms allowed him to navigate the dense vegetation easily, pushing aside branches and vines that would have slowed a 2-armed creature. His feet, each with 3 opposable digits, found purchase on the slippery ground with ease. Vorthak was in his element. The jungle reminded him of hunting grounds on his homeworld. Dense, dangerous, filled with hidden threats. Perfect. 50 kilometers away, Jiwoo emerged from her pod into a completely different mindset. She did not immediately begin running or hiding. Instead, she stood perfectly still for a full minute, just listening. Birds called in the canopy above. Insects buzzed around her. Water dripped from massive leaves. Wind rustled through the undergrowth. She absorbed it all, letting her mind map the environment. Then she began to move, but not away from Vorthak's position. She moved in a wide circle around her landing zone, studying everything. Which plants had strong fibers that could be used for rope? Which had toxic sap? Which fruits did the local animals eat and which did they avoid? Every detail mattered. Jiwoo's bow was strung and ready across her back. Her knife hung at her hip, but she did not touch either weapon yet. Instead, she began gathering materials. Vines, thorny branches, leaves with particular scents. To any observer, it might have looked like she was wasting time, but Jiwoo was not wasting time. She was preparing the battlefield. By midday, Vorthak had covered 15 kilometers. His superior physiology allowed him to move faster than any human could through the terrain. He had already found Jiwoo's landing pod. He studied the ground around it carefully, finding her tracks leading away. She is heading east, he announced to his drone, toward the river system. Perhaps she plans to use the water to mask her scent. Clever, but ultimately futile. I have hunted in environments far more challenging than this. He followed the trail, his eyes tracking bent grass and disturbed soil. The human was making mistakes already. Her footprints were too visible, her path too easy to follow. Vorthak felt a small pang of disappointment. Perhaps the hunt would be over even sooner than he thought. The trail led him through dense undergrowth and across a small stream. On the other side, he found something interesting. Jiwoo's jacket, torn and left hanging on a branch. Next to it was a small pile of rocks arranged in a circle. Vorthak approached carefully. He had learned long ago that obvious trails could be traps. He scanned the area with all his senses, looking for tripwires or hidden hazards. Finding none, he examined the jacket and rocks more closely. The jacket was warm, not from Jiwoo's body heat, but from a heated rock wrapped inside it, a decoy. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. Clever, he admitted to the drone. She is trying to buy time and confuse me, but a simple trick like this will not work. I have her scent now. I will find her true trail. What Vorthak did not notice was that while he examined the decoy, Jiwoo was less than 200 meters away, watching him through a gap in the foliage. She had circled back, using the stream to mask her scent and the dense canopy to hide her heat signature from his vision. She watched how he moved, how he analyzed the decoy, how his scales shifted color when he was focused. She was learning him, just as he thought he was learning her. Then she disappeared back into the jungle like a ghost. Night fell quickly on Narakas 4. The jungle transformed into a different world. Nocturnal predators emerged. Strange bioluminescent plants began to glow, casting eerie green and blue light through the darkness. Vorthak did not sleep much. His species only needed a few hours of rest per day. He made camp in a small clearing, starting a fire to keep away the local predators. He had lost Jiwoo's trail hours ago and planned to pick it up again at first light. Day 1 complete, he said to his recording drone. The human has shown basic survival knowledge. She understands that running blindly would be fatal, but she cannot hide forever. Tomorrow I will find her real trail and this hunt will end. He settled down to rest, his forearms folded across his chest. His eyes closed, but his ears remained alert. Any unusual sound would wake him instantly. What he did not know was that Jiwoo had spent the entire day preparing. While he had chased decoys and false trails, she had been busy transforming the jungle into her weapon. She had found every toxic plant within a 3-kilometer radius of his likely path. She had identified which local animals were territorial and which were aggressive. She had mapped water sources, animal trails, and the safest routes through dangerous terrain. But most importantly, she had been leaving markers, not for herself but for him. Subtle scents from her rations smeared on specific plants, small disturbances in the undergrowth that looked like careless human passage. A trail that seemed accidental but was actually carefully designed. She was not just surviving. She was hurting him. On the second day, Vorthak woke at dawn feeling confident. He quickly found what appeared to be Jiwoo's fresh trail. This time the signs were more subtle. A few drops of water on leaves suggesting someone had passed by recently. A broken twig at human height. Disturbed moss on a fallen log. She's getting sloppy, Vorthak said with satisfaction. Fatigue is setting in. Her mistakes are becoming more frequent. The end is near. He followed the trail with increasing speed. The signs led him deeper into the jungle, toward a region where the vegetation grew so thick that visibility dropped to just a few meters. Perfect ambush territory, but Vorthak was not concerned. He had his plasma lance ready and his senses alert. The trail led to a small ravine with steep sides. Vorthak looked down and saw fresh footprints in the mud at the bottom. The human had gone down there, probably looking for water. He descended carefully, using all 4 arms to control his movement down the slippery slope. At the bottom, he found the footprints led to a small cave opening. Dark, deep, the perfect place for prey to hide. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in anticipation. Finally, the human had made a fatal mistake. She had cornered herself. He activated the light on his plasma lance and entered the cave. It was empty. No, not empty. There were signs of recent occupation. A small fire pit with cold ashes, some empty ration wrappers, but no human. Vorthak turned to leave and heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A low rumbling growl from the cave entrance. Then another. Then several more. He emerged from the cave to find himself surrounded by 6 Narakas rippers. They were pack predators, each one about the size of an earth tiger but with 6 legs, armor-plated heads, and jaws that could crush bone. They had been drawn to this ravine by something, and now they saw Vorthak as either a threat or a meal. Clever, Vorthak hissed. The human had not been leaving a trail of her own mistakes. She had been leaving a scent trail designed to attract these predators to this specific location. She had known he would follow, known he would come down into the ravine, known the rippers would be here. The fight was brutal. Vorthak's plasma lance burned through the first ripper that attacked, but the others were smart enough to attack from multiple angles. His forearms became an advantage as he fought off teeth and claws coming from every direction. His scales protected him from minor wounds, but the ripper's claws were designed to pierce armor. By the time the fight was over, 3 rippers were dead, and the others had fled. But Vorthak was bleeding from a dozen wounds. News of the challenge spread faster than light through the quantum communication networks. Within 12 hours, every major news outlet in the Concordance was covering the story. By the time Jiwoo's transport ship reached Earth's orbit, betting markets had opened on 40,000 worlds. The odds remained stubbornly in Vorthak's favor. Daehyun had barely spoken during the journey home. He sat in the pilot's chair of his cargo vessel, hands gripping the controls tighter than necessary. Finally, as Earth's blue curve filled the viewscreen, he broke the silence. "You could still back out," he said in Korean. "Pay the forfeit fine. It would bankrupt you, but you would be alive." Jiwoo stood behind him, arms crossed, watching her homeworld grow larger. "He killed Hyun-soo," she said quietly. Daehyun's hands froze on the controls. He turned to look at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Your old instructor? The one who was killed on that diplomatic mission 5 years ago. I ran Vorthak's trophy records through the Concordance database, matched dates and locations. Hyun-soo was on Krylia Prime for cultural exchange talks. Unarmed. He was supposed to be under diplomatic protection." Jiwoo's voice remained steady, but her hands had curled into fists. "Vorthak ambushed him in the nature preserve. Hunted him like an animal. The Krylian government called it a tragic accident. Case closed. Jiwoo, the other 2 were colonists. Mira was a terraforming engineer on New Sol, 34 years old. 3 children. Jun was a cargo hauler, delivering supplies to outer settlements. 28 years old, newlywed." She paused. "Vorthak killed them both within 6 months of each other. Always made it look like accidents or animal attacks. Always on worlds where human law enforcement had no jurisdiction." Daehyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and turned back to the controls. "Where do you need to go first?" The transport landed at the Korean Peninsula spaceport 3 hours later. From there, Jiwoo took a military shuttle to a facility that did not officially exist on any public maps. The DMZ training center had been built deep in the mountains, a legacy of old conflicts that had never quite ended even after humanity reached the stars. Taeyang was waiting for her at the entrance. Her younger brother had grown since she last saw him. He wore the uniform of Earth's Special Forces, the patch on his shoulder marking him as a member of an elite unit. When he saw her, his expression shifted from professional to worried. "Everyone knows," he said as they walked through the security checkpoint. "Every soldier on Earth has heard about your challenge. Command is going insane. Half of them think you are a hero. The other half think you are suicidal. What do you think?" Jiwoo asked. Taeyang was quiet as they descended into the underground training complex. Finally, he said, "I think you are both. I also think you cannot win a straight fight against him. He is bigger, stronger, faster, and has 4 arms. He has been hunting dangerous prey since before you were born." "I know. So what is your plan?" Jiwoo stopped walking and looked at her brother. "Humans do not win fights by being stronger. We win by being smarter, more adaptable, more stubborn." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "We win by making the enemy think they have already won, right up until the moment they realize they have lost." They spent the next week in the training complex. Taeyang had called in favors from every unit he knew. Combat instructors who had served in the Titan conflict came to teach Jiwoo close-quarters fighting techniques. Survival experts who had explored the most hostile regions of Earth shared their knowledge of wilderness tactics. Even a former intelligence officer arrived to teach her psychological warfare methods. But Jiwoo did not train like someone preparing for a fight. She trained like someone preparing for a hunt. "You need to understand his advantages and turn them into weaknesses," the intelligence officer said. Her name was Bo-Ra, and she had spent 20 years studying alien psychology. "Vorthak has superior senses. Better hearing, better smell, better vision in low light. But sensory superiority can become a vulnerability." "How?" Jiwoo asked. Bo-Ra pulled up a holographic display showing Krylian biology. "Their 4 ears can pinpoint sounds with incredible accuracy, but that also means they are more sensitive to certain frequencies. Create enough noise in the right pattern, and you can confuse or even pain him." She zoomed in on the eyes. "Their vision is excellent in darkness, but they struggle with rapid light changes. Flash a bright light suddenly and they need several seconds to adjust." "What about smell?" "Krylians can track scents across miles, but they evolved on a world with very distinct smells. Earth's ecosystem is different. The complexity of our world's biosphere, all the overlapping scents can overwhelm them. You can use that." Jiwoo absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. At night, she studied recordings of Vorthak's previous hunts. The concordance required all duels to be monitored and recorded for legal purposes. and Vorthak had never shied away from publicity. His old hunts were available for purchase on the galactic networks. She watched how he moved, how he tracked, how he killed. She learned his patterns, his preferences, his habits. Vorthak was efficient and proud. He liked to announce his presence to his prey before the final strike, to see the fear in their eyes. He was a showman, always aware of the audience watching. That pride, Jiwoo realized, was his greatest weakness. Meanwhile, across the solar system on the Crystal Nexus, Vorthak was conducting his own preparations. His trophy ship, a vessel equipped with every hunting tool imaginable, orbited the station. Inside, he studied holographic displays of human anatomy and biology. Weak bones compared to most Deathworld species, he muttered, zooming in on a skeletal structure. No natural armor. No claws or fangs worth mentioning. Average reaction time is 0.25 seconds, slower than mine by a factor of 3. His companion, a small quadrupedal creature named Crix, watched nervously from the corner. Crix was a skitterer, a species known for their timid nature and incredible ability to sense danger. He had served as Vorthak's scout for 20 years. "Master," Crix said in his high-pitched voice, "perhaps you should research human psychology more. I have been reading about them." "They are unusual." "Unusual how?" Vorthak asked without looking up from the display. "They are persistence hunters, on their home world, before they developed advanced technology. They would chase prey for days until the animal died of exhaustion. They did not need to be fast or strong. They just refused to stop." Vorthak's mandibles clicked in amusement. "We are not running a marathon, Crix. This is a hunt. 1 week. The human will try to hide, I will find her, and it will be over. I hope you are right, Master, but I have a bad feeling about this one." "You always have bad feelings. That is why you are still alive." Vorthak closed the display and stood up, stretching all 4 arms. "I have hunted creatures that could crush me with 1 blow. I have hunted predators that see in spectrums I cannot imagine. I have hunted on worlds where the air itself was toxic. One small human scientist does not worry me." But that night, alone in his quarters, Vorthak found himself watching recordings of the challenge again. The moment when Jiwoo had looked up at him and asked that question. "Did any of them hunt you back?" Something about her eyes bothered him. There had been no fear in them. No hesitation. Just a cold, calculating assessment, as if she had already measured him and found him wanting. Vorthak shook off the thought. He was being foolish. The hunt would go like all his others. He would win, take his trophy, and his legend would grow even larger. Back on Earth, final preparations were being made. The Concordance had selected the hunt location, Narrakas 4, an abandoned colony world in a neutral sector. The planet had diverse biomes, from dense jungles to barren deserts to rugged mountains. It also had ruins from the failed colony, providing both shelter and hazards. Perfect for a hunt. 3 days before the hunt was scheduled to begin, Hyejin arrived at the training center. She was a human diplomat assigned to the Concordance embassy, and her face was tight with worry. "I tried to stop this," she said to Jiwoo. "I contacted every legal expert we have. But the challenge was issued and accepted under proper protocols. There is no way to cancel it without forfeit." "I do not want it canceled," Jiwoo replied. "Do you understand what will happen if you lose? It is not just about you. The entire galaxy is watching. If Vorthak kills you, it will reinforce every negative stereotype about humans. It will set back our diplomatic efforts by decades." Jiwoo met her eyes. "And if I win?" Hyejin opened her mouth, then closed it. She had not seriously considered that possibility. None of them had. Finally, she said, "If you win, everything changes. The galaxy will see that humans cannot be hunted like animals, that we are not weak just because we look fragile. Then I will win," Jiwoo said simply. The night before departure, Jiwoo stood alone in the training center's memorial garden. It was a quiet place where soldiers came to remember fallen comrades. She found the plaque she was looking for. Lieutenant Hyun-Soo Park, killed in the line of duty serving Earth and the Concordance. "I am going to make him understand," she whispered to the memorial. "I am going to make him feel what you felt. And then I am going to make sure he never hunts anyone again." The next morning, Jiwoo boarded a Concordance transport ship. The Crystal Nexus shimmered like a jewel against the black canvas of space. Inside the station's most exclusive lounge, The galaxy's greatest hunters gathered to share stories and display their conquests. The air hummed with translated voices, each species boasting in their native tongue while universal translators made sense of the chaos. At the center of attention stood Vorthak. He towered over most beings in the room, his 9-foot frame covered in iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to emerald green depending on the light. 4 powerful arms gestured dramatically as he spoke, each movement precise and controlled. His reptilian eyes gleamed with pride as a holographic display floated above his clawed hand. "This one," Vorthak said, pointing to an image of a massive creature with 6 legs and armored plating, "took me 3 weeks to track on Thorax Prime. The Thoraxians are clever prey. They can sense vibrations through the ground from miles away." He paused for effect, letting the crowd lean in. "But I learned to move through the trees. When it finally realized I was hunting it, the chase lasted 2 days. Magnificent sport." The assembled hunters clicked, chirped, and rumbled their approval. Vorthak's reputation was legendary across 40 star systems. He had hunted on death worlds that would kill most species within hours. His trophy collection included creatures from high-gravity planets, toxic atmospheres, and volcanic hellscapes. "Tell us about the Magmarian," someone called from the crowd. It was a Veltheran, a species known for their garden worlds and peaceful nature. They rarely understood the thrill of the hunt, but even they had heard of Vorthak's encounter with a silicon-based life form. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a smile. "Ah, yes. Imagine hunting something that swims through molten rock like you swim through water. The temperatures on Magmar 7th would melt most of your ships." He brought up another hologram, showing a serpentine creature made of crystalline structures and flowing magma. "I wore a thermal suit rated for stellar core temperatures. Even then I nearly died twice. But the hunt, my friends, the hunt was worth it." The crowd murmured with admiration. Even those who had never hunted a day in their lives found themselves caught up in the stories. Vorthak knew how to work an audience. A small, furry creature with 8 eyes spoke up. "What about Deathworlders? Have you ever hunted sentient species from hostile planets?" The question hung in the air. Hunting non-sentient creatures was one thing. Hunting intelligent beings was technically legal under Concordance law, but it existed in a moral gray area. The rules stated that any hunt must be consensual or occur under specific dueling conditions. However, enforcement was difficult in the outer systems. Vorthak's expression shifted slightly. His scales darkened to a deeper shade of purple. "I have hunted 3 Deathworlders," he said, his voice quieter but no less proud. "Sentient creatures from planets classified as Class 8 or higher." The crowd fell silent. This was different from hunting animals, no matter how dangerous. "The first was a Gravithian from a world with 3 times your standard gravity," Vorthak continued. "Strong, durable, but slow to adapt. The second was a crystal born from the Shattered Rings. Beautiful species, really, but predictable in their movements." He paused, and someone asked, "And the third?" "Humans," Vorthak said, his tone dismissive. 3 of them, actually. Soft-skinned apes from a waterlogged rock they call Earth. Class 9 death world, if you can believe it. The Concordance classifies them as coming from one of the most hostile planets in known space, but I found them disappointing. He pulled up images of 3 humans. They looked fragile compared to most species in the room. No natural armor, no claws, no enhanced sensory organs visible to the eye. "They break easily," Vorthak continued. "Weak bones, poor senses, no natural weapons to speak of. I expected more from a species with such a reputation. The whole hunt took less than a day for each one. They never even knew I was tracking them until it was too late." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nodded, accepting his assessment. Others looked uncomfortable. Humans were relatively new to the Concordance, having joined only 150 years ago. They kept mostly to themselves, building their colonies slowly and carefully. Most species knew little about them beyond basic facts. In the corner of the lounge, sitting alone at a small table, Jiwoo had been listening to the entire conversation. She wore simple clothes, nothing that would draw attention. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her face showed no expression as she watched Vorthak perform for his audience. She had come to the Crystal Nexus for a xenobiology conference, not to listen to hunters boast about their kills, but 3 humans. He had killed 3 humans. Jiwoo stood up slowly. She was short by human standards, barely 5.5 feet tall. In this room full of aliens, many of whom towered over most species, she looked tiny, insignificant. She walked across the lounge with steady, measured steps. The crowd parted as she approached. Up close, Vorthak was even more imposing. His smallest arm was thicker than her entire torso. His claws could easily rip through steel. His reputation was built on decades of successful hunts on worlds that killed most visitors within hours. Jiwoo looked up at him and asked in a clear, calm voice, "Did any of them hunt you back?" The lounge went completely silent. Vorthak looked down at the tiny human before him. For a moment, he seemed confused by the question. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that came from somewhere in his massive chest. The crowd joined in, nervous laughter rippling through the room. "Hunt me back?" Vorthak repeated, still chuckling. "They were prey, little human. Prey does not hunt the hunter." "Then you did not hunt them," Jiwoo said. Her voice remained calm, but something in her tone made the laughter die down. "You murdered them." The word hung in the air like a blade. Several aliens stepped back instinctively. Vorthak's scales flushed darker, a sign of anger in his species. "I am Vorthak of the Krillian hunting clans. I have hunted across 200 worlds. How dare you—" "In human culture," Jiwoo interrupted, "true hunting means both parties know they are in the hunt. Both have a chance to win. Both can be predator or prey. What you describe is not hunting. It is simply killing something weaker than yourself." She paused, her eyes never leaving his. "Where I come from, we have a word for beings who kill those who cannot fight back. We call them cowards." The insult was clear even across species barriers. Vorthak's forearms tensed, his claws extending slightly. The crowd held its breath. Several aliens were already backing toward the exits. Fights between species could turn deadly very quickly. But Vorthak did not attack. Instead, a different look crossed his reptilian features. Interest, challenge, something that might have been respect. "You speak boldly for such a small creature," he said slowly. "Perhaps you would like to prove your words? Perhaps you would like to be my next trophy." Jiwoo's expression did not change. "I accept your challenge, but under concordance dueling laws, neutral ground, equal starting positions 1 week, winner takes all." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Concordance dueling laws were ancient, established long before humans joined the galactic community. They were designed to settle disputes between species in a fair manner. Once invoked, both parties were legally bound to follow through. There was no backing out. Vorthak studied the human before him. She was tiny, fragile-looking, but something in her eyes reminded him of the predators on his homeworld, the ones who survived not through size or strength but through intelligence and ruthlessness. "Agreed," he said finally. His mandibles clicked in anticipation. 1 week? I look forward to adding you to my collection, human." "My name is Jiwoo," she said quietly. "And you should learn it, because it will be the last name you ever hunt." She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her like water. At a table near the entrance, a man with weathered features and a cargo ship captain's uniform stood up quickly, his face pale with worry. "Jiwoo, what have you done?" Daehyun asked in Korean as she approached. She looked at her old friend and replied in the same language. "What I should have done the moment he started talking. That monster killed 3 of our people for sport. This ends now." As they left the lounge together, behind them Vorthak was already pulling up holographic displays of Earth and its environments. The crowd pressed closer, everyone talking at once about the challenge. Within minutes, news of the hunt had spread to every corner of the Crystal Nexus. Within hours, it would spread across the galaxy. The odds were set at 200 to 1 in Vorthak's favor. After all, he was a legendary hunter who had survived hundreds of deadly encounters. Jiwoo was just a human, a scientist, and nobody from a waterlogged rock. But those who set the odds did not know humans very well. They did not understand what it meant to come from a Class 9 death world. They did not understand what it meant when a human decided that something needed to end. They were about to learn.